the world's food system is broken. While 50% of food is wasted, nearly 1 billion people still go hungry.
The world's population is expected to increase to between 9 and 10 billion by 2050.
Growing affluence is increasing demand for animal protein-rich diets. While this may be a huge opportunity for the agri-food sector,
Producing enough food to meet this demand poses real and significant challenges.
globally, unsustainable food production, distribution and consumption is having devastating effects on soil erosion, water pollution, deforestation, biodiversity loss and climate change.
Sustainable intensification, or green growth, is how the Irish food industry believes it can help meet the world's growing food needs.
Ireland is a huge food producer. Exports generate €10 billion to the economy each year, but it's also responsible for 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions.
We want to expand our food production, and we have a commitment to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we emit. How do you square that circle? That's a huge dilemma for the country.
While there's been lots of controversy around Ireland's food strategy, I want to find out if it's possible to increase profitability for our farmers,
Boost the economy of local communities, while at the same time making our whole food system more sustainable.
There's a logic that each country and region in the world should produce the food that best suits their climate and conditions. The south of Spain is perfect for olives and oranges, but not ideal for grass-fed beef. Ireland's mild, wet, temperate climate makes us exceptional at growing grass. Because of this, beef and dairy farming now dominates Ireland's agri-food sector, with 90% of Ireland's farmland in grass pastures. The problem is, when a cow eats grass, it belches out a lot of methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. One cow produces so much methane, it has the equivalent global warming effect of the average family car. While one cow isn't a big deal, the problem is there are now over 6 million cattle in Ireland.
It's hard to believe that dairy and beef create so much greenhouse gas, that farming accounts for 1/3 of our total greenhouse gas emissions. So how can we achieve green smart growth in light of these startling facts?
Ireland's agri-food sector has achieved huge economic success in recent times, employing 150,000 people and generates over €10 billion in exports of beef and dairy products annually. The plan is to increase this by 50% in the next 10 years. But as an EU member state, Ireland has signed up to binding targets to significantly reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. Ireland's emissions are 50% higher than the European average. We're way off track to meet our 2020 or 2030 targets, where we potentially face massive fines for non-compliance. I'm on my way to Cork to visit Teagasc. I want to see what they're doing to help farmers address this challenge of reducing emissions from food production.
So what's the carbon footprint now of a kilo of beef produced in Ireland?
So I suppose our statistics show that the carbon footprint is roughly about 19 kilos of CO2 equivalent per kilo of beef.
And how much is milk?
So per litre of milk, approximately there's 1.1 kilos of CO2 equivalent per litre of milk in Ireland.
What's the production increase that we're going to have in dairy and beef?
So I suppose from a dairy perspective, we're looking at a 50% increase in output. That's what the food harvest target was. Just to put that in context, at the end of 2015, we'll have achieved between 32 and 33% of that increase in outputs.
With Ireland massively increasing its outputs in this sector, Teagasc are involved in a range of studies to enable farmers to increase efficiency and reduce emissions. Teagasc have teamed up with Waterford Institute of Technology on a major project called Precision Dairy, which uses smart technology to increase the economic and environmental sustainability of dairy farming. These specially designed methane monitors at Teagasc are helping to optimise grasslands and feed to reduce emissions. They're also developing genetic selection techniques for improving fertility and cattle breeding, which likewise helps increase efficiency. Another initiative, called the Carbon Navigator, provides practical guidance to assist farmers make better informed decisions, which reduce farm inputs, emissions and costs. All these measures are helping to reduce the overall emissions per unit of milk or meat produced. This is known as its carbon intensity.
If we're expanding our dairy and our beef sector in terms of production, how can we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in these two very big sectors, and meet the targets for 2020, for 2030, for 2050? In other words, these are really tough targets.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. If we look at the track record, our emissions intensity have continued to reduce in the past, and things like genetic selection, so the type of animals we're selecting, will have a significant effect on the overall reduction in methane production. Getting more grass into the diet, longer grazing seasons, better use of fertiliser, better use of slurry, earlier application of slurry, and more use of clovers, all are significantly affecting and reducing the emissions from Irish agriculture.
That science is really important, but how do you get this message out to farmers, and how do farmers respond to this and put these measures into action?
Very recent study looking at the National Farm Survey has shown there's a huge correlation between emissions intensity and actual economics. So essentially what we're talking about is resource efficiency. Farmers that are more resource efficient in terms of their overall business, in terms of grass, in terms of genetics, will actually be the most profitable and also have the lowest emissions intensity from their production systems.
But if we're going to be increasing production, the overall emissions are going to go up rather than go down.
Our most recent report, I suppose, looks at basically carbon emissions remaining pretty static, even though output increasing quite dramatically based on farmers taking on becoming more efficient from a carbon point of view.
Teagasc research is playing a huge part in reducing carbon intensity of livestock and making Ireland one of the most sustainable producers of dairy products in the world. But even with best practice, food from cattle requires many times more land and water and produces far more greenhouse gases than almost any other food type. The problem is that even with these efficiency gains, the planned expansion in the agri-food industry means Ireland is still set to fail in its emissions reduction targets. To get a better grasp of this conundrum, I'm meeting Tom Arnold, an expert in food policy and head of the Institute of International and European Affairs in Ireland.
We want to expand our food production, and we have a commitment to reduce in absolute terms the amount of greenhouse gases we emit. So how do you square that circle? That's a huge dilemma for the country, and it's a political and it's a policy dilemma. We need to continue to strive to reduce the carbon that we do produce, but we also need to acknowledge that if we don't meet these targets, currently we're in line for very substantial fines. That would be a complete, if you like, almost waste of our national resources, that because we haven't made the adjustments that we should have made, then we are going to be charged large fines as a result of that. That means, I think, looking at the overall balance between livestock production and vegetable production and other forms of land use.
So more diversification on our land.
More diversification on our land, I think, is going to be part of the way where we square this circle of both being the most efficient and sustainable food producer in the world, and that's what we have to aim to, but equally we have to meet these national obligations to reduce carbon. We have to see, can we get a better balance between meat consumption, vegetable consumption, and the means to produce these different products.
Currently, beef and dairy exports are the central focus of Ireland's food strategy. But Tom's point is clear that finding a greater diversity in use of farmland is essential if Ireland's agriculture emissions are to reduce. Today, over 2/3 of the food we eat in Ireland comes from abroad, making up almost €5 billion worth of imports. Tipping the balance back to producing more homegrown food for local markets could also help us reduce emissions. But is it possible to diversify some of our production to more sustainable food types and displace imports? I talked to Dr. Oliver Moore, a social scientist and expert in sustainable food.
So well, around here we have a lot of local produce. Duncan, we've got breads made by the Riot Rye Bakehouse
from the village here in Cloughjordan?
Yeah, we've a bakery in Cloughjordan here. It uses organic flours and it's a wood-fired oven as well. Our own kale from the farm, which is available in the shop as well. And we have an organic milk from Mossfield Farm, which is a great local business over in Shinrone. It's a pretty good town for getting your local food anyway, I would say.
Right.
Ireland does a reasonably good job at producing meat sustainably, but one of the issues is that it still doesn't compare to vegetables really in terms of the carbon intensity of the production relative to vegetable production.
Ollie took me to the Eco-Village community farm in Cloughjordan to show me their approach to sustainable food.
So what's happening on the farm here in Cloughjordan at the moment?
Well, it's autumn, so we've got still lots of kale, chard, greens. We've got quite an abundance, really. Polytunnels like this one are great for giving us chilli and coriander, as you can see here, which are really high-value crops that people really like these days.
And there's no fossil fuel being used here for heating or anything like that?
No fossil fuel for heating, no. So it's very efficient in those things.
Great, so it's no heating required.
When you compare the production of vegetables to meat, for example, it's 8 to 10 times more efficient to produce vegetables in terms of CO2 emissions. We also grow peas and beans, which is good for protein, and kale and chard are brilliant for iron and for nutrients. Beetroot are superfoods. If you look around, you can see just a huge amounts of nutrients being produced for dozens of families off a very small piece of land, 2 or 3 hectares.
So if everyone in the world ate the way we do in Ireland, would we be able to sustain this planet?
Not a chance. We're already 50% overcapacity in terms of our ecological footprint. If the rest of the world caught up to just the European standard of living, you would be 300% over the carrying capacity of the planet, which obviously is a disaster. Like we work really hard trying to make things more efficient in climate change terms with our dairy and beef sectors, but really, if you look at how easy it is to do it more efficiently with vegetables, we should really try and move more towards vegetable production, but also more towards mixed farming, towards farmers growing their own feeds, and towards building soil carbon. There's a whole load of areas that we could start to work on to make food much more sustainable.
It's astonishing how much more nutrients can be produced in fruit and vegetable horticulture in Ireland, at a fraction of the land area and with far less emissions. But if it's likely that world demand for beef and dairy will continue, the question is, can we bring some balance back in the range of types of Irish food produce in a way that's economically beneficial for our farmers? I'm off to Loughbora to meet Tony Geraghty, who is doing just that. Tony explained that he could barely make a living off his 150-acre cattle farm. But over the last 15 years, he's reduced his herd numbers and turned to organic production. He's also diversified part of his land to a new fruit and veg box scheme enterprise. And this provides 90% of his farm's income and has created employment that now supports 3 families in the area.
So this means a lot of livelihoods, does it not?
It does mean, yes, there's plenty of people employed here to pack and to bring the produce to market. And it's about maximising the income for the farm as well, because we're getting the consumer price at the end instead of selling to a middleman or selling to a supermarket who then bump up the price. All the money is coming back into the system here.
It's all recirculating in the local economy.
Okay.
And why did you go organic?
Well, we're organic because we believe it's the only sensible way to farm. We're doing less harm to the environment. We're producing healthier food, and these are the things that motivated us really in the end.
And when it comes to carbon emissions, obviously ruminant animals are going to be releasing methane, and you're going to get from fertiliser and from slurry nitrous oxide. How do you deal with that issue in organic farming?
Well, you have fewer animals per acre, so you have less of it for a start. But on this farm, as you see, we have planted trees. About 40% of the farm is under trees at this stage. So in the end, we are acting as a carbon sink.
Because you're doing both here. You've
Yes.
got some of your land with cattle for organic beef, and you've got other parts for vegetables. Which gives the better benefit in terms of use of land?
Well, here the two enterprises marry very well because the waste vegetables get fed to the animals, and the waste from the other end of the cattle feeds the vegetables. So it's a virtuous system. In terms of overall turnover, the vegetables are more productive, and there's more money out of those. Beef is notoriously unprofitable, and whenever numbers go up, the price comes down, and I would be very wary of producing an awful lot more beef.
Who makes the profit in meat?
Good
Because
question.
small farmers are struggling. They're
Yes.
barely able to survive
Yes.
on cattle farms, producing beef.
Yes.
So who's making the money? Who's making the profits?
Well, practically every farmer in the country will tell you that the money is being made on the other side of the farm gate. It's been made by the factory, or it's been made by the people who are distributing the meat, or it's been made by the supermarkets who are selling the meat. Here, because I'm direct selling, I'm making the money.
Tony, when you look at all the impacts from food production globally, and issues like climate change coming down on us, biodiversity loss, and food production being at risk, and shortage of water, all the big environmental problems, do you think the way we're actually growing food today, is it sustainable, the way we're doing it?
Well, my view is that it's not. That what really should happen, in my view, is that the resources that are being pumped into chemical agriculture should be pumped into doing things organically. I have survived perfectly well without worming, without the dosing of animals for quite a number of years now, without the addition of chemicals to the land. I see no reason why that couldn't be replicated and produce more food sustainably and economically.
Addressing the challenge of the environmental footprint of food isn't just an issue for farmers. It's also a question of what we choose to eat. Enda McAvoy is one of Ireland's top chefs, and he's convinced that we can enjoy healthy, tasty, nutritious food without having a negative impact on the environment. His new Michelin star restaurant in Galway sources only local and seasonal food. I caught up with Enda at his local fruit and veg supplier to learn about his approach to sustainable food.
Enda, you're a great chef, but I see you out here now on a farm where all the food is produced. How important is the growing of the food to you?
Well, it's paramount to us because, the whole point of our restaurant is that I suppose we want to have full control over where everything comes from. We also only use ingredients from the west of Ireland, and we're kind of turning it on the head a little bit in that, we're so vegetable-centric, we're not using a whole lot of protein, we don't use beef that much. There's no big steaks on the menu, there's no big lumps of meat on the menu, The amount that it costs to rear a cow far outweighs the nutritional value anyway. And to find vegetables of a certain quality in Ireland is very difficult. And it's very difficult to get it off any of the big suppliers. And any sort of interesting vegetables, because they always end up with the same varieties of everything. So we met up with Fergal Emerson and his partner Emanuela, and they had a farm that they wanted to produce a wide variety of vegetables. And we came to an agreement that they'd produce the majority of the vegetables for our restaurant.
And do they do that?
I'd say they produce at this point about 80%, and we're hoping to go further than that this year.
80% of all the vegetables that you supply in your restaurant?
Yeah. So we have the freedom to choose what seeds we need every year, and Fergal will go and grow them for us, and see if they succeed and see if they don't succeed. And then we find out as the years go by what vegetables suit this place.
Is Fergal here, by the way?
Fergal's just up here now.
This is Manu, she's watering the winter.
Hi, Manu. How are you?
Nice to meet you. How are you?
And you're watering at this time of the year?
Yes. Well, they need a little bit of water as well now, yes.
So you've got a huge range of different things. What are you growing?
Well, I mean, throughout the year, we probably grow 30 or 40 different types of vegetable. We try and grow as much variety as we can so we can have a continuity of supply.
Enda mentioned that you supply enough vegetables for 8,000 meals, which is equivalent to 60% of the food for all of his restaurant in a year. That's a massive amount of food from 1 acre of land. Is that all of your produce?
No, well, no, not at all. I mean, our bread and butter is our community-supported agriculture. We've 20 families who have shares in our CSA.
And are these all local people that you're giving probably boxes? Is that how you're being?
Well, we have half the people are here in Loughrea. We are just outside Loughrea, 5 kilometers, and half of the people are in Galway. So,
But is 1 acre enough to do what you're doing, you know?
I think we can do more on the small area that we have. I mean, it's about doing it better, you know, and it's the same, we look for trying to do quality as opposed to quantity. We could broaden our diet considerably because our climate will grow a lot more than, you know, the typical
We have a
carrots,
great,
leeks.
great growing climate for vegetables, yet we
Absolutely.
grow so little of it.
Yeah.
You know, how do you reconcile this situation where we can grow so much nutrient? What you're doing, we can employ so many people on our land, we can create all these environmental benefits and sustainability.
I think the way it's set up at the moment seems to be that in Ireland, the agricultural and food policy is serving the needs of corporations and the global market. It's not serving the needs of Irish people. It's not serving our environment or citizens who need to eat healthily and need to eat locally. Taking a short-term vision of trying to make as much money as you can off grass monoculture isn't looking at the kind of long-term of what Ireland potentially could have in 20, 50 years. And that's what I suppose we'd all like to see is something that is a bit more focused on serving the people of the country as opposed to, like I said, the big global markets.
Fergal and Manu have dispelled the myth that we can't grow a variety of fruit, veg and herbs in Ireland. The fact that they can cultivate over 40 varieties on just 1 acre of land is truly impressive. And Enda McAvoy's culinary skills showcases their wonderful produce.
Hi, Enda. Hi, how are you? Good. Thank you. This looks very interesting. What is this?
This is our carrot dish. It's one of the dishes on the tasting menu.
Right.
And it's basically it's a celebration of carrots. Then we have like a soup course, which is this one that you see here. Monkfish liver with seaweeds and a broth made out of just shiitake mushrooms. And this is the broth here.
Broth, wow.
This is poured at the table. So it's made out of seaweeds again and just shiitake mushrooms. These are from Fergus Farm as well.
I was looking at this one here.
Yeah,
What's this?
This is fermented gooseberries.
That's gooseberry. Mm-hmm. With salt.
Yeah, we just salted and fermented. Yeah.
Very nice. Can we in Ireland be self-sufficient in food?
There has to be a shift of focus away from what is traditionally expected on a plate, you know. There has to be a shift in focus away from meat anyway. Eat less meat could be a good start. An awareness of where your food comes from, and not just a fleeting awareness of where your food comes, like a real awareness of where your food comes from.
Can I try this?
Yeah, of course you can, yeah. Might be a bit cold now though.
Well, certainly looking forward to it. This is magic.
Yeah.
I can see why people appreciate food from here. In my journey around Ireland, I've discovered that we can produce a huge variety of food at a local level.
If we're really serious about pursuing smart green growth, then we must ensure that all our beef and dairy is the most sustainably produced in the world.
With so many small farmers struggling to make a living, some might consider diversifying into producing fruit and vegetables for local consumption.
what you waiting for now? What you waiting for?
Tony's example of giving over less productive land to forestry to offset carbon emissions, reducing herd numbers and putting a focus on producing local food for local needs proves that Irish farming can be sustainable, resilient and economically viable. We only have one planet and its population is growing. What we eat, how it's produced and where it comes from can really make a difference.